Revenge is a dish best served in a red dress. At least, that's what I told myself as I stared at the gilded doors of the chaotic wedding reception. But my hands were shaking, and I knew I couldn't walk in there alone. The silk of my gown felt like a second skin, tailored to perfection, hugging curves I usually kept hidden under gallery blazers. I had spent a fortune on this look. The slit went high up my thigh, dangerous and sharp. I looked like a weapon. But standing in the hallway of the Grand Hyatt, listening to the muffled bass of a string quartet playing a pop song, I felt like a fraud. Julian was in there. Julian, who had sworn he wasn't ready for commitment 2 months before proposing to the daughter of a banking tycoon. If I walked in solo, I wasn't the unbothered ex who had moved on to bigger things. I was the bitter, lonely woman haunting the periphery of his happiness. I needed a shield. I needed a distraction. I scanned the lobby. Couples drifted by in pastels and tuxedos, soft and harmless. Useless. I needed something harder, something that would make Julian choke on his champagne. Then, I saw the smoke. It curled from the shadows of a massive marble pillar near the terrace exit. A man was leaning there, detached from the celebration as if he belonged to a different species entirely. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was in a suit cut from midnight black fabric that seemed to absorb the light around him. He was massive, broad-shouldered in a way that gym memberships couldn't buy, a kind of primal structural density that screamed violence. He brought a cigarette to his lips, his movements languid, bored. The stark white cuff of his shirt pulled back just enough to reveal ink. Dark, intricate tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing into the crisp line of his collar. He looked lethal. He looked like a car crash waiting to happen. He was perfect. I swallowed the lump of fear in my throat, smoothed the silk over my hips, and walked toward him. The click of my heels on the marble sounded like gunshots in the quiet corridor. I stopped 3 feet away. The smell of expensive tobacco and sandalwood hit me, masculine and heavy. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He paused. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head to look at me. His eyes were dark, devoid of warmth, sharper than shattered glass. "Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin." He exhaled a plume of smoke, not blinking. He didn't check me out, he assessed me. It felt like being scanned by a predator deciding if I was prey or a nuisance. "And you look like you're about to commit a felony," he replied. His voice was a low rumble, a deep baritone that vibrated in the floor beneath my feet. There was a faint trace of an accent, Korean, smooth and clipped. "Not a felony," I corrected, stepping closer, invading his personal space. "Just a misdemeanor. I need a favor." He dropped the cigarette and crushed it beneath a polished black shoe. "I don't do favors. I have $500 in my clutch," I lied. "I had a lipstick and a credit card maxed out on this dress, and an ex-boyfriend inside who thinks I'm miserable. I need you to be my date. 1 hour. We walk in, we drink, we look good, we leave. You don't even have to talk." He tilted his head, amused now. A smirk played on his lips, terrifying and handsome. "You want to hire me? I want to rent your presence. You look substantial." He pushed off the pillar, and suddenly he was towering over me. He was taller than I realized. At least 6'3". The air around him felt charged, static electricity snapping against my skin. He stepped into me, forcing me to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. "Keep your money," he murmured, his eyes dropping to the slit in my dress before returning to my face. "I'm bored. And you look like trouble. Is that a yes?" He extended an arm, offering it to me. It wasn't a gentleman's gesture, it was a challenge. 1 hour. "But know this, Asha." I froze. "I didn't tell you my name. You didn't have to." He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "If I walk in there with you, I don't let go. You start this, you finish it. Do you understand?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a warning bell I chose to ignore. "I understand." I slid my hand into the crook of his arm. His bicep was hard as iron beneath the suit jacket. We walked toward the double doors. The music grew louder, the chatter of the wedding guests swelling like a tide. The attendant swung the heavy doors open. Light flooded out, blinding and golden. Dong-ho shifted. His hand left his side and slid around my waist, his palm settling on the small of my back, hot and heavy, possessing me completely. He pulled me flush against his side, his fingers digging in just enough to bruise. He whispered, "Showtime, sweetheart. Don't trip." The silence didn't fall across the room, it crashed. Walking into the ballroom felt less like entering a wedding reception and more like parting the Red Sea, if the sea was made of chiffon, polite envy, and old money. The air, previously thick with the dull roar of gossip and the clinking of crystal, evaporated the moment we stepped across the threshold. I kept my chin high, channeling every ounce of composure I had learned from staring down critics at gallery openings. But my confidence was a thin veneer. The real source of the gravity in the room wasn't my red dress or the daring slit up my thigh. It was him. Dong-ho didn't walk. He prowled. His movement was a fluid, predatory glide that made the tuxedo-clad men around us look stiff and cumbersome. The heat of his hand on the small of my back was a branding iron, burning through the silk. He wasn't just guiding me, he was anchoring me to him. "Head up," he murmured, his voice a vibration against my temple that no one else could hear. "They're not looking at your dress, Asha. They're wondering how a creature like you managed to tame a monster like me. You have a high opinion of yourself," I whispered back, forcing a smile for the crowd. "I have an accurate one." We moved deeper into the room. The crowd parted instinctively, making a wide path toward the center. I saw the whispers starting behind hands, the widening eyes of women who recognized the danger in him, and the narrowed eyes of men who recognized the dominance. Then the crowd broke, and there he was, Julian. He was holding a flute of champagne, looking every bit the golden boy corporate climber he tried so desperately to be. His tuxedo was navy, safe, and expensive. He was laughing at something his new father-in-law was saying, but the laughter died in his throat the second he saw me. His eyes raked over me, registering the dress, the hair, the sheer audacity of my presence. Then his gaze slid to Dong-ho, and I saw something I had waited 2 years to see. Inadequacy. Julian shrank. It was subtle, a shifting of weight, a straightening of the spine that looked forced. But it was there. He excused himself from his bride's father and walked toward us. He wore that familiar, condescending smile, the one he used when he wanted to make me feel small. "Asha," Julian said, his voice pitched just loud enough to draw attention. "I honestly didn't think you'd come. It's brave of you." He didn't look at Dong-ho. He refused to acknowledge him, a petty power play that was failing miserably. "Why wouldn't I?" I replied, my voice cool. "I love a good performance, Julian. And this?" I gestured vaguely at the excessive floral arrangements. "It's certainly theatrical." Julian's smile tightened. "Well, I'm glad you're here. Though I see you brought a friend. I didn't realize you were dating. Who is this? One of your artists?" He finally looked at Dong-ho, dropping the question with a sneer, implying that anyone I was with must be a starving painter or a bohemian nobody. Dong-ho didn't blink. He looked down at Julian with an expression of profound boredom, as if Julian were a smudge on a pristine window. "Yeo Dong-ho," he said. He didn't offer his hand. Julian blinked, waiting for a title, a profession, something to latch onto. When it didn't come, he chuckled nervously. "Right. And what do you do, Mr. Yeo?" Asha usually has such eclectic taste. The air around us seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dong-ho took a half step forward. He didn't posture or puff out his chest. He simply occupied the space so completely that Julian had to step back or be swallowed. "I specialize in risk management and acquisition," Dong-ho said. His voice was soft, smooth, and terrifyingly corporate. "In fact, I was just reviewing the portfolio for the Sinclair merger your firm is attempting to close next week." Julian's face went pale. The Sinclair merger was the deal that was supposed to make his career. It was the reason he was marrying into this family. How do you know about that?" "That's confidential." "Nothing is confidential, Julian," Dong-ho said, saying his name like it was a slur. The leverage ratio is unstable. The assets are overvalued. If I were the blocking minority, which I often am, I would advise the board to liquidate the liabilities. Dong Ho tilted his head, his dark eyes boring into Julian's soul. And you look like a liability. Julian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish on dry land. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sheer terror of a man realizing he was swimming with a shark. Enjoy your wedding, Dong Ho finished, dismissing him. Try not to depreciate the asset before the honeymoon. Before Julian could recover, the opening notes of a waltz swelled from the orchestra. Dong Ho didn't wait for my permission. He slid his hand from my back to my waist, his grip firm, and swept me onto the dance floor. You, I breathed, my heart racing as he spun me into the center of the room, are terrifying. He was tedious, Dong Ho replied, pulling me flush against him. I hate tedious men. We fell into the rhythm of the waltz. I had expected him to be rough, but he moved with a surprising, lethal grace. He led with absolute authority, anticipating my movements before I even made them. We were too close for polite society. My chest brushed his with every breath. I could smell him, the sharp, metallic scent of ozone, the rich earthiness of sandalwood, and beneath it all, the faint, stale tang of cigarette smoke. It was an intoxicating, masculine mix that made my head spin. The lights of the chandelier blurred overhead as we turned. For a moment, I let myself believe the lie. I let myself feel the strength of the arm around me, the protection of the monster who had just silenced my past with a few sentences. I looked up at him, caught in the gravity of his dark eyes. You play the part well, I whispered, breathless. I'm not playing, Asha. His tone had changed. The amusement was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp alertness. His hand on my waist tightened, not romantically, but tactically. He spun me again, a little faster, a little harder. Keep smiling, he ordered, his voice barely moving his lips. Look at me. Only at me. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning slid down my spine. What? Why? There is a man standing by the buffet table, gray suit, red tie, scar on his left cheek. I started to turn my head, but Dong Ho's hand slid up to the nape of my neck, his thumb pressing into the soft hollow of my throat, forcing me to keep my eyes on his. His touch was electric, possessive, and terrifying. I said, "Don't look," he hissed, his face inches from mine. To the room, it looked like a moment of intense passion. To me, it felt like a hostage negotiation. He's watching us. I need you to tell me if he taps his earpiece. Use the reflection in the mirror behind me. Do it now. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't a game. The fake boyfriend, the snarky banter, the victory lap over Julian, it all shattered. I was suddenly very aware of the muscle coiled beneath his suit. The gun I now suspected was tucked against his ribs, the dangerous reality of the man holding me. I swallowed hard, forcing my eyes to shift past his shoulder, finding the reflection in the massive gilded mirror on the far wall. I found the gray suit. The man was staring right at us, his face grim. He's reaching for his collar, I stammered, my voice trembling. He's talking into it. Dong Ho didn't flinch. He didn't panic. A dark, terrifying smile spread across his face, one that didn't reach his eyes. Good, he whispered, spinning me one last time, the room blurring into a streak of golden light. The party is over, Asha. Hold on tight. Walk. The command was a low growl against my ear, sharp and non-negotiable. The romantic haze of the waltz evaporated instantly, replaced by a tension so thick it felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped. Dong Ho didn't wait for me to process it. His hand, previously a warm weight on my waist, turned into a vice grip on my elbow. He steered me away from the center of the floor, cutting through the crowd with a dark, terrifying efficiency. We weren't leaving, we were evacuating. Dong Ho, you're hurting me, I hissed, trying to keep my footing as my heels skidded on the polished marble. What is going on? We can't just leave. Julian is watching. Forget Julian. He snapped, not looking at me. His eyes were scanning the perimeter, darting from the exits to the staff doors. Julian is the least of your problems right now. Keep your head down and move. We burst out of the ballroom doors and into the hotel lobby. The transition was jarring. The golden warmth of the reception was replaced by the stark, sterile brightness of the hotel entrance. Dong-ho didn't slow down. He marched me past the confused concierge, past the guests waiting for elevators, straight for the revolving glass doors. As we stepped out into the night, the silence hit me first. The air was biting cold, a sharp contrast to the humid heat of the dance floor. The porta cocra, usually buzzing with activity at a high-end venue like this, was dead. The valet stand was empty. The little podium where the attendant kept the keys was knocked over, lying on its side like a discarded toy. "Where is the valet?" I whispered, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Gone," Dong-ho muttered. He stopped abruptly, pulling me behind him. His body became a wall between me and the darkness of the parking lot. He reached inside his tuxedo jacket, but not for a cigarette. Then, the world exploded into noise. Tires screeched, a high-pitched, agonizing wail that tore through the night. Twin beams of blinding white light flooded the driveway as two black SUVs roared around the corner, mounting the curb and blocking the exit. They drifted to a halt with military precision, boxing us in against the hotel entrance. The doors flew open. These weren't street thugs. These weren't muggers looking for a wallet. 6 men poured out, dressed in tactical black gear, their faces obscured by balaclavas. They moved in a synchronized formation, silent and deadly. In their hands, the dull metal of silencers caught the light. "Get down." Dong-ho shoved me hard. I stumbled back, crashing against the rough concrete of a decorative pillar. My red dress tangled around my legs, tearing at the slit. I crouched there, gasping, my hands pressed over my ears, expecting to die. But Dong-ho didn't hide. He advanced. What happened next wasn't a fight. It was an execution. The first man lunged, swinging a collapsible baton aimed at Dong-ho's skull. Dong-ho didn't even flinch. He sidestepped the blow with a movement so fast it blurred, catching the man's wrist in midair. There was a sickening, wet crack, the sound of bones snapping like a dry twig. The man screamed, but the sound was cut short as Dong-ho drove his palm into the man's throat, collapsing his windpipe. He shoved the choking man into the line of fire of the second attacker. Phut, phut. 2 silenced shots spit into the night, embedding themselves in the human shield Dong-ho was holding. I watched, paralyzed, my breath trapped in my lungs. The man I had danced with, the man who had spoken about corporate mergers and leverage ratios, was gone. In his place was a creature of pure violence. He moved like a dancer of death, fluid, precise, and horrifyingly calm. He dropped the body and spun, a high kick connecting with the jaw of the gunman. The impact sounded like a gunshot itself. The gunman crumpled. Dong-ho snatched the falling weapon from the air before it hit the ground. He didn't hesitate. He raised the gun and fired 3 times. Phut. Phut, phut. 3 men dropped. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Just efficient mechanical neutralization. The last man, realizing the tide had turned, hesitated. That was his mistake. Dong-ho closed the distance in 2 strides. He didn't shoot him. He grabbed the man by the tactical vest and slammed him into the side of the SUV. The metal crunched under the force. Dong-ho leaned in, whispering something I couldn't hear, before delivering a brutal knee to the man's chest. The attacker slid to the ground, unconscious. It was over in 20 seconds. The silence returned, heavier than before, broken only by the groans of the men on the ground and the distant wail of sirens approaching. Dong-ho stood amidst the carnage, his chest heaving slightly. He adjusted his cuffs. He straightened his tie. He looked like he had just finished a mild workout, not a massacre. He turned to me. His eyes were wild, the pupils blown wide with adrenaline. "Car." Now, he grabbed my wrist again, pulling me up from the pavement. My legs felt like jelly. I stumbled, staring at the bodies. You just move, Asha." He roared, dragging me toward a sleek matte black sedan parked illegally near the entrance. He threw the back door open and practically threw me inside. The interior smelled of leather and gun oil. He slammed the door shut, a heavy solid thud that told me this car was armored. He vaulted into the driver's seat, hitting the ignition. The engine roared to life, a monstrous, guttural sound that shook the frame of the car. He threw it into gear and slammed on the gas. We peeled out of the driveway, swerving around the blocking SUVs, the tires smoking as we hit the main road. I was thrown back against the leather seat, gasping for air, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked out the rear window. The hotel was disappearing into the distance, a glowing beacon of the normal life I had just left behind. "What is happening?" I screamed, my voice cracking. "Who were they? Who are you?" Dong-ho didn't answer immediately. He was focused on the road, weaving through traffic with terrifying speed. He checked the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. "They were cleaner crews," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Sent to tie up loose ends. Someone knew I was in the city." "You killed them," I whispered, the reality crashing down on me. "You just killed 4 people." "I neutralized a threat," he corrected, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "There is a difference. Stop the car. I want to get out. Take me back." "No," I said, "stop." I reached for the door handle. Click. The sound of the central locking mechanism engaging echoed through the silent cabin. It was a heavy, metallic sound, a prison sound. I froze, my hand hovering over the handle. I looked at the front seat. Dong-ho slowed the car down as we merged onto the highway. He took one hand off the wheel and brought it to his mouth. He wiped a small speck of blood from his lower lip, a splash from the fight that had marred his perfect face. He looked at the blood on his thumb, then looked at me in the mirror. His eyes were dark voids, possessing a gravity that pulled me in and crushed me all at once. "I told you, Asha," he said softly, the threat wrapping around my name like a caress. "I don't let go." The elevator ride was silent, a vertical ascent into a different world. The steel doors hummed as we shot upward, the numbers on the digital display blurring. 50, 60, 70. I stood in the corner, pressing my back against the cold metal wall, my clutch gripped so tight my knuckles were white. Dong-ho stood in the center, unmoving, staring straight ahead at the polished doors. He hadn't said a word since the highway. The blood on his lip had dried, a stark crimson mark against his skin. Ding. The doors slid open. I stepped out, not into a hallway but directly into a sprawling cavernous space that felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for the living. The penthouse was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls wrapped around the entire space, offering a panoramic view of Seoul's skyline, a sea of glittering neon lights stretching endlessly into the darkness. But inside, it was cold. Everything was black marble, slate-gray leather, and sharp, aggressive chrome. The air smelled different here. It didn't smell like the city below, exhaust and street food. It smelled filtered, sterile. It smelled like isolation. "Don't touch the glass," Dong-ho said, walking past me, his footsteps echoing on the stone floor. "The sensors are sensitive." That snapped the wire of fear that had been holding me together. "Sensitive?" I choked out a laugh, brittle and sharp. "You're worried about fingerprints? You just snapped a man's arm in half in a parking lot." I hurled my clutch at him. It was a pathetic projectile, hitting the back of his broad shoulder and falling harmlessly to the floor with a soft thud. He didn't flinch. He didn't even turn around. He just kept walking toward a massive, illuminated wet bar on the far side of the room. "Who are you?" I screamed, my voice echoing in the vast, empty space. "You lied to me. You said you were in risk management." "I am," he replied calmly, reaching for a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid. "I managed the risk. You're alive. You're a murderer. You're a monster." I advanced on him, fueled by the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I needed him to react. I needed him to shout back. To be human. "Look at me. Who are you really? You're not a businessman." Dong-ho set the glass down on the marble counter with a deliberate click. He let out a slow, weary sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I'm tired, Asha," he murmured. He reached up and undid his tie, pulling the silk strip from his neck and dropping it onto the counter. Then, his fingers went to the buttons of his shirt. "What are you doing?" I stepped back, my anger faltering into wariness. He ignored me. One by one, he undid the buttons, peeling the fabric away. He winced slightly as he pulled the shirt off his left shoulder, a flicker of pain crossing his face. Then, the shirt fell to the floor, and the air left my lungs. I had seen the ink peeking out from his collar and cuffs before, But that was just the edge of the map. This was the territory. His torso was a masterpiece of violence. Dark, intricate ink covered him like armor. A massive, snarling Korean dragon coiled around his torso, its scales rendered in painstaking detail. The beast's head rested over his heart, its eyes seemingly glowing. Waves of black ink crashed over his shoulders and down his arms, a turbulent sea of darkness that swallowed his skin. Scars, pale, jagged lines, cut through the tattoos here and there, interruptions in the art that told stories of knives and bullets. On his left ribcage, a fresh, angry bruise was already blooming purple from where the tactical vest had slammed into him. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. He turned to face me, the dragon on his chest seeming to move with the flex of his pectoral muscles. He caught me staring. He didn't cover up. He let me look. He wanted me to see. Yo Dong-ho, he said again. But this time, the name carried a weight it hadn't before. It wasn't just a name. It was a title. The Shadow King, I whispered. The name slipped out before I could stop it. It was an urban legend in the art world. Whispers at gallery openings about black money, about the man who controlled the unseen currents of soul, the man who brokered power with silence and violence. They said he didn't exist. They said he was a ghost story used to scare rival gangs. You've heard the stories, he said, picking up his glass. Everyone has heard the stories, I breathed, backing away until my legs hit the back of a leather sofa. They say you own the police. They say you disappear people. People disappear themselves, he said, taking a sip of the whiskey. I just facilitate the exit. I want to go home, I said, my voice trembling. Please, I won't tell anyone. I just want to go back to my apartment. I have work tomorrow. I have a life. He laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. Asha, look at me. He walked around the bar, closing the distance between us. He stopped a few feet away, looming over me, half naked and terrifying. Do you think the men in that parking lot were random muggers? They were professionals. They were sent by the Triad. And do you know what they saw? He pointed a finger at my face. They saw you. They saw you get into my car. They saw me protect you. In their world, that makes you a weakness. That makes you leverage. The blood drained from my face. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you walk out that door right now, you will be dead before sunrise. Or worse, they will take you to get to me. They will peel you apart slowly, layer by layer, just to see if I come running. Tears stung my eyes. So what? I'm just stuck here? Trapped? Safe, he corrected. You are safe here. No one gets into this building unless I allow it. No one touches you unless I say so. He poured a second glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal. He walked over to me and held it out. His hand was steady. His gaze was unyielding. Drink, he ordered softly. It will stop the shaking. I looked at the glass, then up at his face. The dragon on his chest seemed to be watching me, daring me to refuse. I reached out, my fingers brushing his warm skin as I took the glass. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through me. How long? I asked, gripping the glass like a lifeline. Until the threat is neutralized, he said. Days, weeks, maybe longer. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. I could smell the whiskey on his breath mixing with the metallic scent of his skin. Make yourself comfortable, Asha. The guest room is down the hall on the right. But let's be clear about one thing. His eyes darkened, the pupils swallowing the irises. You are not a guest. You are a loose end that I decided not to cut. Welcome home. 3 days. I had been trapped in this glass fortress for 72 hours, and I was climbing the walls, literally, in a sense. I had paced every square inch of the penthouse. I knew that the marble in the bathroom was Italian Carrara, that the sheets were 800 thread-count Egyptian cotton, and that the refrigerator was stocked with enough San Pellegrino to hydrate a small army. But what I also knew, with agonizing clarity, was that Yeo Dongho had terrible taste in lighting. It wasn't that the art was bad. It was actually infuriatingly good. He had pieces that museums would kill for. A charcoal sketch that looked like a genuine Egon Schiele, a massive abstract expressionist canvas that dominated the hallway, and several delicate Korean celadon vases. But the placement was criminal. I stood in the main living area, staring at a Lee Ufan canvas, one of his dialogue series, a gradient of gray fading into white. It was a masterpiece of minimalism, a study in silence, and he had hung it directly opposite the eastern glass wall. "You're killing it," I muttered to the empty room. "The UV exposure alone is going to bleach that gradient in 6 months." I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't going to sit around weeping like a damsel. I was a curator, and I refused to let a masterpiece die of negligence, even if its owner was a murderous psychopath. I dragged a heavy leather armchair across the floor, kicked off my heels, and climbed up. The painting was heavy, framed in solid oak, but adrenaline and boredom gave me strength. I unhooked it from the wall, groaning under the weight, and carefully lowered it to the floor. A little to the left, a deep voice rumbled. I nearly dropped the priceless canvas. I spun around, heart hammering. Dong Ho was leaning against the doorframe of his office, a room I had been strictly forbidden from entering. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the black waves of ink on his forearms. He was holding a tablet, and on the screen I caught a glimpse of a grainy black and white feed. He had been watching me. "You have cameras," I accused, clutching the painting like a shield. "I have cameras everywhere, Asha," he replied, walking into the room. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. "I've been watching you pace for an hour. I was wondering when you'd finally snap. I didn't expect you to start redecorating." "I'm not redecorating. I'm saving your investment," I snapped, gesturing at the window. "Direct sunlight on a Liu Fan? Are you insane? You might as well take a belt sander to it." He stopped in front of me, looking from the empty spot on the wall to the painting in my hands. "It looked good there. It looked expensive there. Now it looks like you don't know what you have. This needs soft, indirect light. It belongs in the hallway alcove, away from the windows." He studied me for a long moment. I braced myself for a threat, for him to remind me that I was a prisoner and he was the king of Seoul. Instead, he shrugged. "Then move it." Dinner was a surreal affair. We sat at a dining table long enough to seat 20 people. He sat at the head, and I sat to his right. The distance felt ridiculous, yet the air between us was thick with an intimacy that hadn't been there 3 days ago. The food was exquisite, sushi that dissolved on the tongue, delivered by a silent staff member who vanished as quickly as he appeared. But I had barely touched it. I was watching Dong Ho. He ate with the same precision he used for everything else. Efficient, controlled. "Why did you really go?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I looked up, swirling the wine in my glass. "Go where?" "To the wedding." "Alone." He set his chopsticks down. "You said you wanted revenge. But revenge requires a plan. You didn't have a plan. You just had a red dress and a death wish." I stiffened. "I had a plan." "You were shaking," he countered softly. "When you walked up to me outside, you were terrified. You knew Julian would humiliate you. You knew walking in there solo was social suicide. So why do it?" I opened my mouth to give him the rehearsed answer, that I was over him, that I was strong. But looking at Dong Ho, looking at the man who wore his demons on his skin, the lie felt cheap. "It wasn't heartbreak," I admitted, my voice quiet. "I don't love him anymore. I stopped loving him the day I found out he was sleeping with his secretary." "Then what?" "It was pride," I said, meeting his gaze. He expected me to crumble. He expected me to stay home and cry and be the broken ex-girlfriend. If I didn't show up, he won. He got to write the narrative of my life. And I refused. I refused to let him see me bleed. Dong Ho went still. The skepticism in his eyes vanished, replaced by a flicker of recognition. It was a look I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the look of a predator watching prey. It was the look of a general recognizing a fellow soldier. "Pride," he repeated, testing the word on his tongue like a rare vintage. "Pride is a dangerous fuel, Asha. It burns hotter than love. And it burns longer." "I know," I whispered. "It's the only thing that kept me standing when we walked into that ballroom." "No," he corrected, his voice dropping an octave. "It's what made me walk in there with you." Insomnia was a side effect of captivity I hadn't anticipated. It was 2 a.m. The penthouse was silent, the city lights below casting long, shifting shadows across the marble floors. My throat was dry. I slipped out of the guest room, barefoot, wrapped in a silk robe I had found in the closet, and made my way to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the appliances and the city outside was enough. I poured a glass of water, leaning against the cold granite island, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Couldn't sleep? I gasped, spinning around. Water sloshed over the rim of the glass, splashing onto my hand. Dong-ho was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing the crisp shirt now. He was in gray sweatpants, low slung on his hips, and a black t-shirt that clung to his chest. His feet were bare. His hair was messy, falling over his forehead, making him look younger. Less like a king, more like a man. "You move too quietly," I breathed, setting the glass down. "Habit," he murmured. He walked into the kitchen, moving into my personal space. He didn't stop until he was a foot away. "Did I scare you?" "Yes." "Good. You should be scared." But his voice lacked the edge it usually carried. It was rough with sleep, heavy with something else. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face. For a second I thought he was going to touch me. I thought he was going to trace the line of my jaw, pull me in. My breath hitched. My heart hammered a traitorous rhythm against my ribs. I should have backed away. I should have run. But I didn't move. I looked up at him, seeing the conflict warring in his dark eyes. The magnetic pull was undeniable, a physical force that seemed to warp the air around us. It wasn't just fear. It was fascination. It was the thrill of standing on the edge of a cliff. He looked at my lips. Then his gaze drifted up to my eyes. His hand dropped. He took a step back, the spell breaking. "Go to bed, Asha," he said, his voice strained, tight with restraint. "Before I forget that I'm supposed to be protecting you." He turned and walked away into the shadows, leaving me standing in the dark, shivering, and more awake than ever. The door to the sanctum was open. For 3 days, the heavy mahogany door at the end of the hall had been a black hole, swallowing Dong-ho for hours at a time. It was the nerve center, the brain of the beast, and for the first time I was invited inside. "Come in," he called out, not looking up from his desk. I stepped across the threshold, my bare feet sinking into a plush Persian rug that probably cost more than my entire student loan debt. The office was a stark contrast to the sterile, modern coldness of the living room. This room felt heavy. It smelled of espresso, old paper, and expensive leather. The walls were lined with dark walnut bookshelves filled with actual books, not decorative spines. Behind the massive desk, a bank of 6 monitors glowed with stock tickers, surveillance feeds, and architectural blueprints. Dong-ho was pacing. He was dressed in a charcoal vest and trousers, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He held a phone to his ear, rattling off rapid-fire Korean that sounded less like a conversation and more like a verbal assault. He slammed the phone down onto the receiver, an old-fashioned heavy thing, and ran a hand through his hair. He looked frustrated, not the cool, lethal calm of the parking lot, but the human irritation of a man dealing with incompetence. "Problems in paradise?" I asked, leaning against a leather armchair. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "Problems in the boardroom," which, unfortunately, is the only battlefield that matters right now. He gestured for me to sit. I took the chair opposite his desk. It felt like a job interview. "I am trying to close a deal," he began, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. "The Seongsu redevelopment project. It's massive. Commercial, residential, cultural. It is the final step in washing my money. Once this goes through, the Yeo Empire is legitimate. No more shadows. Just clean, taxable, respectable revenue." "Sounds boring," I said, "but safe." "It is necessary," he corrected. "But the consortium I am dealing with, they are old money. Traditional. Conservative. They know my reputation. They know where I came from. They look at me and they see a thug in a tailored suit." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city he ruled but couldn't quite buy. "They don't trust a single man with violent tendencies. In their world, stability is a wife. A family. A man who goes home to a warm hearth is a man who won't burn the city down for sport." He turned back to me, his gaze sweeping over me with a calculated intensity that made me sit straighter. "They want a family man," he said softly. "So, I need to become one. I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. You, a family man? You have a dragon tattooed on your chest and a sniper team on speed dial. Good luck with that. I don't need to be one, he said, walking around the desk until he was leaning against the front of it, towering over me. I just need to look like one. The air in the room shifted, the business frustration evaporated, replaced by the predator's focus I had seen at the wedding. You, he said, pointing a finger at me. You are perfect. Excuse me? You are educated. You are articulate. You are stunning, but in a way that commands respect, not just lust. You are a curator. You speak the language of art, culture, and high society. You can charm a room of boring old men while simultaneously signaling that you are untouchable. He leaned in closer. I have a proposition for you, Asha. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of proposition? A contract, he said, his voice dropping to a smooth corporate purr. 6 months. You play the role of my fiancé. You wear the ring. You attend the galas. You smile for the cameras and tell the press how my rough exterior hides a heart of gold. We secure the deal. We legitimize the company. And then we stage a quiet, amicable breakup due to irreconcilable career paths. I stared at him. It was insane. It was a plot from a bad movie. But looking at the sharp lines of his face, the intensity of his need, I realized he was deadly serious. You want me to fake a relationship with the head of the Korean Mafia, I said slowly. For 6 months. Yes. And what do I get out of it? I asked, crossing my legs. Besides, not being murdered by the triad. Safety is the baseline, he agreed. But I know you, Asha. Safety isn't enough. You are ambitious. You have fire. He smirked, a cruel shark-like expression that chilled the room. You want to win, he whispered. You crashed that wedding because you wanted to hurt Julian. But walking in with a stranger? That's a pinprick. I can give you a sledgehammer. He pushed off the desk and walked over to a side table, picking up a tablet. He tapped the screen and handed it to me. It was a financial dossier. The header read, Sterling Hale Acquisitions. Julian's firm. Julian is a climber, Dong Ho said, his voice dripping with disdain. His entire career is built on the success of the Sinclair merger. If that fails, he fails. So, Dong Ho said, leaning down so his face was level with mine. If you agree to this arrangement, I will buy Sterling Hale. I will become the majority shareholder. And I will strip it for parts. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at the numbers on the screen. I will cancel the Sinclair merger, he continued, painting the picture of destruction. I will audit his department. I will expose every cut corner and every padded expense report. I will fire him publicly, for cause, ensuring he never works in finance again. I will leave Julian with nothing but his cheap suit and his regrets. And you. He paused, letting the silence hang heavy and sweet. You will be on my arm while I do it. You get to watch him burn from the VIP box. I looked at the tablet. I imagined Julian's face, the smugness wiped away, replaced by the ruin I held in my hands. It was petty. It was vindictive. It was absolutely delicious. I set the tablet down on the desk and stood up. I looked Dong Ho in the eye. 6 months, I said. No physical expectations, I have my own room. And I get final say on my wardrobe. Dong Ho's smile widened. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a victory smile. Agreed. I extended my hand. Then we have a deal, Mr. Yeo. He looked at my hand. For a moment, I thought he was going to shake it like a partner. Instead, he reached out and wrapped his warm, large fingers around my wrist. His grip was firm, possessive. He didn't shake my hand. He turned it over, exposing the sensitive, pale skin of my inner wrist. He lowered his head. His lips brushed against the pulse point, hot and shocking. A shiver shot down my spine, violently electric, curling my toes into the expensive rug. It wasn't a kiss of affection. It was a seal of ownership. A deal, he murmured against my skin, the vibration traveling up my arm. He released me slowly, his eyes dark with satisfaction. He turned and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a panel of mahogany. He spun the dial, left, right, left, and the heavy steel door clicked open. He pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't the bright, hopeful turquoise of Tiffany's. It was black velvet, worn with age. He snapped it open. Inside sat a ring that sucked the light out of the room. It wasn't a diamond. It was a sapphire, but so dark it looked black, cut in a sharp, brutal rectangle. It was set in heavy, blackened platinum, surrounded by tiny, jagged rubies that looked like drops of blood. "This is not a prop," Dong-ho said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost reverent tone. "This was my mother's. She wore it when she built this family from the gutters of Busan." He took my left hand and slid the ring onto my finger. It was heavy, cold. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me. "Do not lose it, Asha," he warned, his eyes locking onto mine, the playful corporate mask gone completely. "That ring is worth more than your life. It is worth more than this entire building." I looked down at the black stone on my finger. It looked beautiful. It looked dangerous. "I won't lose it," I whispered. "Good," he said, turning back to his desk. "Go get dressed. We have a gala to attend tonight." "And Asha?" I paused at the door. "Yes, wear the red dress," he said, not looking up. "I want them to see you coming." The flashing lights were blinding, a strobe light assault that turned the night into a disjointed series of frozen frames. Click. Dong-ho's hand on the small of my back. Click. My smile, practiced and radiant. Click. The black sapphire on my finger catching the glare, swallowing the light like a miniature black hole. We were at the K-Auction Winter Gala, the most prestigious art event of the season. A month ago, I would have been here as a worker, standing quietly near a sculpture, handing out brochures, invisible to the billionaires bidding on legacy. Tonight, I was the main attraction. I was wearing emerald green velvet, a gown that draped off my shoulders and pooled on the floor like liquid money. Beside me, Dong-ho was a monolith in a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it felt like a sin. He played the part of the doting fiancé with terrifying ease. His touch was constant, a hand on my waist, fingers brushing my elbow, a lean in to whisper a joke that wasn't really a joke. To the press, we were the power couple of the year. The ruthless king of soul and his elegant, art-world queen. To me, it was the most high-stakes performance of my life. "Smile, sweetheart," Dong-ho murmured, his lips barely moving as we walked past the red velvet rope. "The editor of Vogue is to your left. Look happy." "I am happy," I whispered back, flashing a dazzling smile at the camera. "I just saw the estimate on that Basquiat inside. You're overpaying." He chuckled, a deep sound that vibrated against my side. "I'm paying for the headline, Asha, not the canvas." We entered the ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos, jewels, and polite conversation that masked ruthless ambition. This was my world. I knew the provenance of every piece on the walls. I knew which collectors were fake and which were serious. I felt a surge of power. For the first time, I wasn't just observing the game, I was a player. "I need to speak to Chairman Lee," Dong-ho said, spotting a gray-haired man near the podium. "He's the last vote we need for the Seongsu deal. Will you be all right?" "I can handle a room full of art snobs, Dong-ho. Go." He hesitated, his thumb brushing the pulse point of my wrist, a habit he had developed over the last few weeks. "Stay in sight. If anyone bothers you, I know the drill. Go." He nodded and melted into the crowd. I took a glass of champagne from a passing tray and turned to admire a large, chaotic abstract piece by a rising minimal artist. "You look expensive." The voice was slurred, familiar, and laced with venom. I didn't flinch. I took a slow sip of champagne before turning around. "Julian." He looked terrible. The golden boy of finance was tarnished. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his tie loosened as if he couldn't breathe. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his skin had the pallid, clammy sheen of a man who hadn't slept or eaten in days. "Hello, Julian," I said, my voice cool. "You look tired." "Tired?" He let out a harsh, barking laugh that drew a few glances. "I'm ruined, Asha. That's what I am. Sterling Hale stock dropped another 12% this morning. The auditors are tearing apart my department. They're talking about embezzlement charges. Me. Embezzlement. Sounds stressful, I said, keeping my face blank. Maybe you shouldn't have padded those expense reports. His eyes widened. How did you? He told you. Your new, Owner. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of scotch poured off him in waves. I know what you're doing, he hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You think you've won? You think prancing around here with that gangster makes you special? Everyone is laughing at you, Asha. They know what you are. And what am I, Julian? You're a whore, he spat, the word ugly and loud. You're just a high-class whore he's using to wash his blood money. Once he gets his permit, he's going to toss you back into the gutter where... I turned to walk away. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a scene. He grabbed me. His fingers clamped around my upper arm, digging into the soft flesh. It wasn't a lover's grip. It was an act of desperate violence. Don't walk away from me when I'm talking to. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. Julian stopped mid-sentence. His eyes, fixed on something over my shoulder, dilated in pure terror. He let go of my arm as if I were burning. I didn't need to turn around to know who was there. I could feel the heat radiating off him. I could smell the sandalwood and the ozone. Dong Ho stepped into the space between us. He didn't look at me. His focus was entirely on Julian. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't yelling. He was completely, terrifyingly still. Mr. Yeo, Julian stammered, taking a step back, nearly knocking over a waiter. We were just catching up. Old friends. Dong Ho didn't blink. He reached out and adjusted Julian's crooked bow tie. It was a gentle, almost intimate gesture, but Julian froze like a statue, sweat beading on his forehead. Dong Ho leaned in. He brought his lips close to Julian's ear, but the room was so quiet, or maybe my senses were just so heightened, that I heard every syllable. Touch her again, Dong Ho whispered, his voice a low, melodic purr of violence, and I will cut that hand off and mail it to your mother. Julian made a choking sound. His face went gray. He looked at his own hand, then at Dong Ho, realizing with absolute certainty that this was not a metaphor. I understand, Julian squeaked. Good, Dong Ho said, patting Julian's cheek twice. Now get out of my sight before I decide to lower the property value of this building by painting the walls with you. Julian didn't wait. He turned and fled, disappearing into the crowd like a rat scurrying for a sewer. Dong Ho turned to me. The demon mask didn't slip, but his eyes softened as they scanned my face, then my arm where Julian had grabbed me. Are you hurt? He demanded softly. I'm fine, I breathed, my heart racing. He's pathetic, Dong Ho. He's so small. He is irrelevant, Dong Ho corrected. He looked around. People were staring. The confrontation had been quiet, but the tension had rippled outward. The press cameras were pointed our way, hungry for the drama. They are watching, Dong Ho noted. Let them watch, I said, feeling a reckless courage rising in my chest. Dong Ho's eyes darkened. He saw the challenge in my gaze. He stepped closer, eliminating the distance between us. One hand slid up my back to cradle my neck, his thumb resting against my jawline. The other hand wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his hard body. Mine, he whispered, a statement of fact, not a question. Then he kissed me. It wasn't the polite, stage-managed peck of a fiancé. It was acclaiming. His lips crashed onto mine, hot and demanding. He devoured me right there in the middle of the ballroom. His tongue swept into my mouth, tasting of whiskey and danger. It was possessive, raw, and overwhelmingly powerful. My knees went weak. I clung to the lapels of his tuxedo, melting into him, kissing him back with a fervor that surprised us both. The flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm, but I didn't care. In that moment, with his hand in my hair and his heart beating against mine, the truth hit me harder than the champagne. Julian, the corporate, safe, civilized man, had made me feel small, unsafe, and alone. But Dong Ho? The monster? The Shadow King with the dragon ink and the blood on his hands? He would burn the world down just to keep me warm. And God help me, I liked the heat. The call came at 11 p.m. Dong Ho was pouring a glass of water in the kitchen, his shirt unbuttoned, revealing the edge of the dragon tattoo on his chest. We had spent the evening in a rare state of quiet domesticity, watching the rain lash against the penthouse windows. Then his phone buzzed. Not the sleek smartphone he used for business, but the burner, a blocky, gray device that sat on the counter like a grenade waiting to have the pin pulled. He answered it. His face went stone cold. "How many?" he asked. A pause. "I'm on my way." He hung up and was moving before the phone hit the counter. He pulled a handgun from a hidden holster beneath the kitchen island and checked the magazine with a mechanical click-clack. "What's wrong?" I asked, standing up. The air in the room had shifted from cozy to combustible. "A fire at the Incheon docks," he said, holstering the weapon at the small of his back. "Container 404. It's a breach. Someone is trying to torch my shipment." "Send Min-jae," I said, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "You don't have to go. This shipment is personal. I have to verify the loss myself." He walked over to me, grabbing my shoulders. His grip was hard, urgent. "I'm sending you to the safe house in the hills. The penthouse is too exposed if this is a coordinated hit. Min-jae will drive you. Do not make stops. Do not open the window." He kissed my forehead, a hard, brief press of his lips that felt more like a prayer than a goodbye. "I'll be back in 2 hours," he promised. "Keep your phone on." He turned and strode out the door, the elevator swallowing him whole. I didn't know it then, but that was the mistake. The fire wasn't the attack. The fire was the bait. The rain was torrential, turning the streets of Seoul into slick black rivers. I was in the back of the armored Mercedes, sandwiched between 2 silent bodyguards. Min-jae was driving, his eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. "We're being followed," Min-jae said, his voice calm but tight. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Lose them. I'm trying, Miss Asha." But there. The world ended in a screech of metal. A massive garbage truck, its headlights off, roared out of a side street. It didn't brake. It accelerated. It slammed into the side of our car with the force of a freight train. The impact was deafening. Glass shattered, not falling but exploding into a million diamond dust particles. The car spun wildly, the world outside becoming a blur of wet asphalt and streetlights. I was thrown against the door, the airbag detonating in my face like a punch. We slammed into a concrete divider, the metal groaning in protest. Silence. Ringing silence. I gasped, choking on the acrid smoke of deployed airbags. "Min-jae?" No answer. The front of the car was crushed. Min-jae wasn't moving. "Get her." A voice screamed from outside. The back door was ripped open. Hands, rough, wet hands, grabbed my ankles. I didn't scream. I kicked. I drove the heel of my stiletto into a face, feeling cartridge and bone give way. A man howled, but another grabbed my hair, yanking me out of the wreckage and onto the wet pavement. "Let go of me." I screamed, clawing at eyes, at skin, at anything I could reach. I wasn't the curator anymore. I was the Shadow King's fiancé. I fought with the desperation of a woman who knew exactly what happened in the dark. But there were too many of them. A heavy boot slammed into my ribs, knocking the wind out of me. As I gasped for air, a rough burlap sack was shoved over my head. The world went black. I woke up to the smell of rust and low tide. My head was pounding, a rhythmic thudding that matched the pulsing pain in my ribs. I was seated in a metal chair, my hands zip-tied behind my back so tightly my fingers were numb. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the harsh glare of a single overhead halogen bulb. I was in a warehouse. It was cavernous, filled with empty shipping containers and the distant sound of dripping water. "She's awake." A man stepped into the light. He was short, wiry, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and left to weather in a storm. He wore a red silk suit that looked garish against the industrial grime. This was Choi. The Viper. Dong-ho's rival. He pulled up a chair and sat backward on it, facing me. He held a knife, idly cleaning his fingernails with the tip. "You are prettier in the magazines," Choi said, his voice scratchy, like sandpaper on stone. "Yeo Dong-ho has expensive taste." I forced my breathing to slow. "Panic is a choice," Dong-ho had told me once. "Don't choose it." "If you're looking for an autograph," I said, my voice raspy but steady, "you'll have to untie my hands." Choi laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. "Spirited. I like that. It makes breaking you more interesting." He leaned in, the knife point hovering inches from my knee. "I don't care about you, girl. I care about what you know." Yeo keeps his encryption keys for the offshore accounts on a biometric drive. Where is it? I don't know what you're talking about, don't lie to me. Choi roared, slamming his hand on his own knee. You are his fiancé. You live in his house. You wear his mother's ring. He pointed the knife at the black sapphire on my finger. He trusts you. Where are the codes? My mind raced. He thought I was a partner. He thought this was a love match. He thought I was leverage. If I told him I knew nothing, he would torture me until I died. If I cried and begged, he would enjoy it. I had to become something else. I had to become the woman Dong-ho had created. I threw my head back and laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that echoed in the empty warehouse. Choi paused, confused. You think this is funny? He hissed. I think you're an idiot, I said, locking eyes with him. I channeled every ounce of disdain I had ever seen Dong-ho use. I looked at him like he was a stain on a rug. You went through all this trouble, I said, shaking my head. The truck, the kidnapping, the drama. And for what? A PR stunt, what? Choi frowned. You think Yeo Dong-ho loves me? I scoffed. Look at me, Choi. I'm a curator. I'm a face for the cameras. I'm a contract. He hired me to make the investors happy so he could close the Seongsu deal. That's it. I leaned forward as far as the bonds would allow, my voice dripping with venomous truth. I don't have his codes. I don't even have the passcode to his Wi-Fi. I am a prop. And you just kidnapped a prop. Choi stared at me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. You lie. He gave you the ring. It's glass, I lied smoothly. Costume jewelry. Good lighting does wonders. He came to the gala, Choi argued, but his confidence was wavering. He threatened Julian for you. He threatened Julian because Julian insulted his property, I snapped. Not his heart, his brand. I took a deep breath and delivered the final blow. If you kill me, he won't pay a ransom. He won't trade his empire for me. He'll just hire another model, put her in a red dress, and release a press statement saying I died in a tragic car accident. You have nothing, Choi. You have absolutely no leverage. The room fell silent. Choi looked at me, then at the ring, then back at me. I held his gaze, terrified that he would hear the thunderous beating of my heart. We'll see, Choi muttered, standing up and snapping the knife closed. If you are worthless, then you won't mind if we send him a piece of you to test the theory. He turned to his men. Call Yeo. Tell him we have the girl. Tell him the price is the codes. If he hesitates, cut off a finger. He walked away. I slumped back in the chair, the adrenaline crashing. I had bought myself time. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. Come for me, Dong-ho. I prayed silently into the darkness. Don't let me be right. The phone rang. It was a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the damp silence of the warehouse. Choi smiled, his teeth stained with tobacco. He pulled the phone from his pocket, hit the speaker button, and held it up like a trophy. Yo, Choi greeted, his voice dripping with false camaraderie. I hope you are sitting down. Your fiancé and I are having a lovely chat about encryption keys. She is very stubborn. I was just about to start removing the distractions, starting with her left pinky. Silence stretched over the line. It wasn't the silence of hesitation, it was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. Choi. Dong-ho's voice came through. It didn't sound like a human voice. It sounded like grinding metal. I am not negotiating. Choi frowned. You don't have a choice. I have the girl. I am not asking for the codes. Dong-ho continued, his tone flat, dead. I am giving you an instruction. And what is that? Run. The line went dead. Choi lowered the phone, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. He's bluffing. The world disintegrated. The corrugated metal wall to my right didn't just bend. It vanished. A massive black armored truck smashed through the siding like it was wet paper, the roar of its engine drowning out my scream. Metal shrapnel flew through the air like confetti. The truck skidded to a halt in the center of the warehouse, drifting sideways to create a barricade between me and the bulk of Choi's men. The driver's door flew open. Dong-ho stepped out. He wasn't the corporate shark in the tuxedo anymore. He had shed the jacket. His white shirt was soaked in rain and clinging to his frame, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark waves of ink on his forearms. He held a handgun in each hand. He didn't pause to monologue. He started shooting. It was a blur of violence so efficient it looked choreographed. Bang, bang, bang. 3 of Choi's men dropped before they could even raise their weapons. Dong-ho moved with a terrifying, fluid grace. A storm of bullets and rage. He didn't take cover. He advanced. He was walking into the fire, trusting his armor, trusting his skill, or simply not caring if he lived as long as everyone else died. Kill him, Choi shrieked, scrambling backward over a crate. Kill him now. A guard near me panicked. He realized he couldn't hit Dong-ho, so he turned his weapon toward the easier target. Me. He lunged, grabbing the back of my chair and yanking me backward. Don't move. He screamed, jamming the barrel of his gun against my temple. Yayo. Drop it or I paint the floor with her. Dong-ho froze. He stood amidst the bodies of 5 men, his chest heaving, his guns raised. His eyes locked onto mine. They were wide, wild, and terrified. For the first time, I saw fear in the Shadow King's eyes. The guard behind me tightened his grip, his sweaty hand slipping on the metal chair. Drop them. I looked at Dong-ho. I saw the hesitation. He was going to surrender. He was going to let them kill him to save me. I am not a damsel, I told myself, the adrenaline spiking through the pain in my ribs. I am not a prop. I waited for the guard to shift his weight, to take a breath to shout again. Then, I threw myself backward with everything I had. I slammed my head back, the hard bone of my skull connecting with the guard's nose with a sickening crunch. At the same time, I kicked off the floor, tipping the metal chair violently to the side. Bitch. The guard screamed, stumbling back, his aim knocked wide. I hit the concrete hard, my shoulder taking the brunt of the impact, but I was out of the line of fire. That split second was all Dong-ho needed. Bang. The guard's head snapped back. He crumpled to the floor, dead before he hit the ground. Dong-ho didn't check on me. He knew I was down. He turned his attention to the last man standing. Choi. The Viper was trying to crawl toward the exit, scrambling over the debris. Dong-ho holstered one gun and crossed the distance in 3 long strides. He grabbed Choi by the back of his red silk suit and hurled him against a shipping container. Choi wheezed, sliding down the metal. Yayo, wait. We can make a deal. The territory, take it. Take half. Dong-ho stepped in close. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He looked down at Choi with a cold, absolute disgust. You touched her, Dong-ho whispered. It was business. Choi pleaded, holding up his hands. Just business. She said she was just a contract. She said the ring was glass. Dong-ho reached down and grabbed Choi's left hand. He twisted it, forcing Choi to look at the ring on my finger, the black sapphire that was catching the dim light from the truck's headlights. She lied, Dong-ho said. With a swift, brutal movement, Dong-ho drew a combat knife from his belt. He didn't hesitate. He drove the blade into Choi's chest, twisting it with a finality that ended the Viper's reign instantly. He withdrew the blade and let the body fall. Silence rushed back into the warehouse, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the sound of the rain pounding on the metal roof and the ticking of the truck's cooling engine. Asha. The name was a ragged breath. Dong-ho dropped the knife. He rushed over to where I was lying on the floor, still tied to the overturned chair. He fell to his knees, ignoring the glass and debris biting into his pants. I'm here, I gasped, the pain in my shoulder radiating down my arm. I'm okay. His hands were shaking. The hands that had just slaughtered a dozen men with surgical precision were trembling so violently he could barely hold the knife to cut my bonds. Snap. Snap. The zip ties fell away. He pulled me up, dragging me into his lap, his arms wrapping around me like iron bands. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, breathing in deep, shuddering gasps. I thought I lost you, he choked out, his voice thick with unshed tears. God, Asha. I thought I was too late. You weren't, I whispered, bringing my numb hands up to cup his face. I pulled him back so I could see him. He was a mess. There was a cut on his cheek, his shirt was ruined, and he was covered in the blood of men who had tried to hurt me. But he had never looked more beautiful. He scanned my face, his eyes frantic. He touched the bruise forming on my jaw, his fingers feather light. Did they hurt you? Tell me where. I'll kill them again. I'll bring them back and kill them again. I'm okay, I promised, tears finally spilling over. I'm okay, Dong Ho. He looked at me, really looked at me, stripping away the layers of the contract, the business deal, the pretense. There was no Shadow King in that moment. There was just a man who had stared into the abyss and been terrified of what he saw. It's not glass, he whispered, grabbing my hand and pressing the ring against his chest, right over his beating heart. It's not a prop. You are not a prop. I know, I sobbed. He didn't wait. He crashed his lips against mine. This wasn't the performance for the gala. This wasn't the taunt for the ex-boyfriend. This was desperate. It was hungry. It was a confession written in breath and blood. He kissed me like I was air and he was drowning. I kissed him back, clinging to his wet shirt, pulling him closer, needing to feel the life in him to confirm that we were both still here. The contract burned to ash in that warehouse. The deal was dead. Whatever this was, this terrifying, violent, beautiful thing between us, it was real. And it was just beginning. 6 months ago, I walked into a ballroom shaking in a red dress, desperate for a shield. Tonight, I stood in the center of the Singleton Gallery, wearing gold silk that shimmered like liquid armor, and I didn't shake at all. The room was packed. The elite of Seoul were here, not just because the art was revolutionary, but because they knew better than to miss an event hosted by the future Mrs. Yeo. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations with a calm smile. As I passed a cluster of socialites near the sculpture garden, a hushed whisper caught my ear. Did you hear about Julian Hale? It's tragic, really. I heard the embezzlement trial starts Monday. His wife annulled the marriage yesterday. He's sleeping on his brother's couch, bankrupt. Poor Julian. I paused, sipping my champagne. I waited for the spike of satisfaction, the gloating joy of revenge. But it didn't come. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a mild indifference, like hearing about a stranger's bad weather. Julian was a ghost. He was the past. I walked out onto the private terrace, the cool night air greeting me. Dong Ho was waiting there. He was leaning against the railing, smoking, looking out at the city lights. He turned as I approached, his eyes dark and warm. You conquered the room, he said, flicking ash into the wind. We conquered the room, I corrected, stepping into his space. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I recognized it immediately. The contract. It's midnight, Asha, he said softly. 6 months. The deal is complete. Julian is ruined. Your gallery is funded. And the Seongsu project is finished. He held the paper out to me. You are free to go. No debts. No obligations. I looked at the paper, then up at his face. He was giving me an out. He was letting the bird out of the cage, even though I knew it would tear him apart to see me fly away. I took the paper. I didn't even look at the terms. I ripped it in half. Then in half again. I let the confetti pieces flutter over the balcony, drifting down into the Seoul night. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered, resting my hand on his chest, the black sapphire ring pressing against his heart. Unless you want me to. Dong Ho caught my hand, kissing the knuckles. Never. He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. The contract is void, Asha. The tenure is permanent. I looked out at the skyline, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man in the city. I had crashed a wedding to save my pride. I ended up crashing into a love that would burn the world down. And standing here, in the heart of the fire, I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't trade the burn for anything.
I love this story. The narration is great. The narrator did an excellent job. I would like to see a part 2.